Hey everybody, TimDub151 bringing you another video. And today I want to talk about something that I think is going to be pretty important in the days to come in terms of gaming and where we are in the media. As everybody knows, loot boxes, microtransactions have been in the news almost daily since Star Wars Battlefront 2 has hit the streets, and the microtransactions are being looked at by everyone and their mother, to include governments. Hawaii and Belgium have already declared that they believe it's gambling and it needs to be looked into further. So, what I want to talk about today is the ESRB, or the Entertainment Software Rating Board. The ESRB is supposed to be the barrier between us and government, and they're supposed to regulate the games to ensure the government doesn't have to get involved. And at this point, I think that there's a failure in what they should be doing versus what they are doing. The ESRB was put in place 23 years ago. In 1994, it was established by the Entertainment Software Association, which before that was called Interactive Digital Software Association. It was put together by companies such as Acclaim. EA had a hand in it, and there were other entities that came in and said, this is the way that we're going to regulate games. This is how video games should be looked at. They're going to be looking out for, during that time, and even now, they'd be deemed inappropriate: pornography, gambling, sex, drugs, anything of that nature. They would be looking into it and seeing whether a game needed to be rated on their rating scale. Now, what has happened over the course of the years is the ESRB has been self-regulated, meaning that it regulates itself. There's no outside interference, supposedly, and the ratings are based on their viewings of the games. All games have to have an ESRB rating in the US, or for retailers to be able to sell them. So where does that leave us now with what is going on and what we see happening with microtransactions? Well, to start, the ESRB has already deemed that microtransactions and the loot box system isn't a form of gambling. And they have their reasons for thinking that way. One of the reasons being that they view gambling as losing real money and not being able to recoup it. And with loot boxes, their claim is very similar to what I say when I'm talking to people about my views on it, is it's not really gambling because you can't lose. You may not get something that you want, but you will always get something. Whereas with gambling, you could walk away with absolutely nothing. And I know that that's just an opinion on me, and I'm not here to discuss my opinion on it or argue in favor or against loot boxes or loot crates and how they affect gameplay. I'm wanting to talk about where the ESRB is and what I fear could happen if the ESRB doesn't step in and make a decision on loot crates, whether it be they should be rated differently, or whether they honestly whether they should be rated differently or not. And here's why I say this: the ESRB was basically established to keep government out of gaming, and it's done well to this point. What I fear is going to happen is the ESRB isn't going to step in, and they're not going to do any regulating on this, and then government's going to step in, and then the ESRB is either A, going to be shut down, or B, it's going to become a government regulated firm, or whatever you want to call it, or entity. And at that point, the ESRB is not going to be self-regulated anymore. It's going to have all of its decisions handed down to them by an outside source, being the government. And honestly, in my very own opinion, I am not interested in having the government regulate anything related to gaming. I don't want the government to be able to say that this game should be rated this or this game should be rated that, because it's just more power being handed over to the government for them to decide how and what something could or shouldn't be done. And if the government comes in and deems the loot crates as gambling and they shut it down, great. All the people that are opposed to it, they're going to be happy. But what happens whenever they decide that there's something else in games that they don't like and they want it removed? What then? Then we're sitting ducks, essentially, because we've lost all control. Whereas with the ESRB, you kind of have a little bit of a middle ground with they're going to be looking at it this way or that way. And if they don't make the decision, it's going to be made for them. That's the biggest fear that I have at this point is if a decision isn't made, then one will be made for them, and it may end up hurting us all in the long run. Now, why is the ESRB not viewing loot crates as gambling? That is something that could be debated as well. Because the ESRB, as we all know, was founded by developers and publishers that didn't want the government to be involved. Well, with the developers and publishers being the founding force behind it, does that mean that there's some sort of funding that comes from them? Possibly. I can't say it for sure, and I don't want to speculate, but it's a possibility. It's a huge possibility. So could that be the reason that it's staying out of this conversation, or saying that gambling isn't, or the loot boxes aren't gambling? I don't know, but it doesn't look good either way. And no matter how you slice it, it's putting us all at risk for an outside force coming in and taking control, taking over it, and making the decisions for us. And I'm sure plenty of you, no matter how you feel about the loot crates, no matter how you feel about whether it's gambling or you're labeling it petacaches or pedocaches or whatever you want to call it, we don't want the government to regulate our gaming. You look at the big debate going on with net neutrality at this point, and it's just going to be another layer. With net neutrality potentially going away and then the government stepping on this, what is going to happen? Where are we going to be in terms of gaming, in terms of the internet? It's just too many negative attacks on the gaming industry because of net neutrality and the loot boxes. So I'm really, really worried that this is going to have severely negative impacts on us. And if the ESRB doesn't step up and make the decision, why is it so difficult to say we are going to start rating games that have loot crates that you have to spend money on mature? What is difficult about that? I think that would help. Are people still going to be against it? Absolutely. Do you know what? It moves it up into another category, because right now people are worried about it's young children that are being manipulated into this ring of gambling that these loot boxes present within games. And again, I'm not arguing for or against it. I see the argument from both sides. I just don't want it to go any further than it has to. And with the ERB not stepping in, it's not looking good for the home team, guys. And it's going to be something that could be potentially devastating to the gaming community as a whole. Again, net neutrality isn't doing us any favors. So I don't know. I'm worried. I'd like for you guys to chime in on this and let me know what your thoughts are. I'll post some links down below to the ESRB. I'll also add in some other information. But let me know your thoughts. I want to hear back from you guys. I want to know what you guys are thinking. And let's get this conversation started. The ESRB needs to step up and do their job, because if they don't do their job, someone is going to do it for them. And if that happens, it's going to be a huge can of worms that have been opened on us as gamers, as business people, as anybody that has some type of work within the gaming industry. And I don't think it's something that we want to have happen. So I hope you like this video. If you do, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe, get that notification bell going so you know when more videos are posted. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and get more input. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for watching. Deuces.